The bartender was having a rough day. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair was a mess, and the deep sighs he kept letting out made it clear he was running on fumes. The bar was packed, orders were flying in, and he barely had a second to breathe. That's when the bear walked in. The massive creature lumbered up to the counter and took a seat, his furry frame almost knocking over a stool in the process. The bartender, exhausted but professional, eventually made his way over. "You look exhausted," the bear observed. "Yeah," the bartender admitted, rubbing his temples. "It's been a rough day. What can I get you?" The bear took a deep breath. "I'll have a glass of—" Silence. The bartender blinked. The bear just sat there, staring off into space as if lost in thought. The silence dragged on, stretching uncomfortably. Finally, the bear finished his sentence. "Scotch." The bartender, too tired to question it, simply nodded and reached for a bottle. But curiosity got the better of him. As he poured, he asked, "Why the long pause?" The bear lifted his massive paws onto the counter and wiggled his claws. "Don't you mean big paws?" The bartender sighed and shook his head. "Yeah, sorry," he muttered. "Like I said, it's been a rough day." Two crocodiles lounged lazily by the riverbank, basking under the warm afternoon sun. They had been there for hours, barely moving, just enjoying the stillness of the water. Eventually, the smaller crocodile let out a sigh and turned to his much larger companion. "You know," he said, eyeing the big croc up and down, "I just don't get it. We're the same age. We were the same size when we were little. But look at you. You're huge. And well, let's just say I'm not exactly striking fear into anyone's heart." The big crocodile smirked. "Well, what have you been eating?" "Same as you," the smaller one replied. "Politicians that come here with their mistresses." The big croc nodded. And where do you catch them?" "On the other side of the river, near the car park," the little croc said proudly. "Same here. Interesting?" The big croc narrowed his eyes. "Tell me, how exactly do you catch them?" The little crocodile puffed out his chest. "Easy. I crawl up under one of their big Lexus, BMW, or Mercedes cars and wait. As soon as they unlock the door, bam! I jump out, grab 'em by the leg, shake the crap out of 'em, and then eat 'em." The big crocodile sighed and shook his head. "Ah, I see your problem." "You do?" "Yeah," the big croc said with a chuckle. "By the time you finish shaking the crap out of a politician, there's nothing left but an asshole with a briefcase." On a quiet Sunday afternoon, a rabbit sat in his garden, savoring a steaming cup of Earl Grey. The sun cast a warm glow over the neatly trimmed grass, and the gentle rustling of leaves provided the perfect backdrop for a moment of peace. He closed his eyes, inhaling the delicate aroma of bergamot, utterly content. That peace, however, was short-lived. Bursting through the garden gate came his old friend, ears twitching with urgency. "Please, you have to come back," the friend pleaded. The rabbit sighed and set down his cup. "Come back to what?" "To the synagogue. To the community. You used to lead us. We need you." His friend grabbed him by the arm, tugging insistently. "Come on, you can't just turn your back on us like this." The sudden pull nearly made the rabbit drop his beloved cup. With quick reflexes, he steadied himself, clutching it protectively. "Careful!" he scolded. "You almost made me spill my tea." His friend huffed in frustration, his nose twitching with disappointment. "Fine, if that's how it is." And with that, he stomped off, muttering under his breath. A moment later, the rabbit's wife stepped out onto the patio, wiping her paws on a dish towel. "What was that about?" she asked. The rabbit took a slow, thoughtful sip of tea before answering. "He wanted me to lead the community at the synagogue again." She raised an eyebrow. And, he sighed, shaking his head. But I would have had to drop the T. A man burst into the doctor's office, clutching his hand and howling in pain. His face was contorted with agony as he stumbled toward the bewildered doctor. "Please, doctor, you've got to help me," he cried. "I've been stung by a bee." The doctor, remaining calm, gave him a reassuring nod. "Don't worry, I'll put some cream on it." The man's eyes widened in disbelief. "What good will that do?" "You'll never find that bee. It must be miles away by now." The doctor sighed. No, I mean, I'll put some cream on the place where you were stung." "Oh," the man nodded in understanding. "It happened in the garden out back behind my house." The doctor pinched the bridge of his nose, his patience thinning. "No, I mean, which part of your body did the bee sting?" "My finger!" the man yelped, still waving his injured hand. "The bee stung my finger and it really hurts." "Which one?" asked the doctor. The man stared at him, dumbfounded. "How am I supposed to know?" "All the bees look the same to me." A man settled into his window seat on a plane, adjusting his seatbelt and getting comfortable. Just as he was about to close his eyes, another passenger arrived. A serious-looking man in a suit, accompanied by a sleek black Labrador retriever. The dog calmly took the middle seat between them, sitting with perfect discipline. The first man raised an eyebrow. "I don't mean to be rude, but why is there a dog on the plane?" The suited man smiled. "Oh, Sniffer? He's not just any dog. He's a DEA agent. One of the best drug-sniffing dogs in the business." "Really?" "Yep. I'll show you once we're airborne." Curious, the man leaned back and waited. Once the plane leveled out, the agent gave Sniffer a signal. "All right, boy. Search." Sniffer immediately leapt down from his seat and trotted down the aisle, nose twitching as he sniffed passengers. After a few moments, he stopped beside a woman, sitting still and staring at her. He lingered for a few seconds before returning to his seat, placing one paw gently on the agent's arm. "Good boy," the agent said, patting his head. Then he turned to his seatmate. "That woman has marijuana. I'm noting her seat number. Authorities will handle her when we land." "Wow," said the first man, thoroughly impressed. "That's amazing." The agent smiled. "Watch this. Search again." Sniffer hopped down and made another pass through the cabin. This time, he stopped beside a man, stared for a few seconds, then trotted back and placed two paws on the agent's arm. "That guy's got cocaine," the agent explained. "The police will be waiting for him, too." The first man whistled. "This is incredible!" Encouraged by the reaction, the agent gave Sniffer one last command. "Search again." Sniffer took his time, sniffing up and down the aisles. But then something changed. He suddenly bolted back, leapt into his seat, and without warning proceeded to poop all over the place. Passengers recoiled in disgust. The first man gagged and covered his nose. "Ugh, what the hell? That's disgusting." Shocked, he turned to the agent. "I thought this was a highly trained dog. What on earth is going on?" The agent's face had gone pale. He swallowed hard. "He just found a bomb." The small town's churches had a problem, a furry, bushy-tailed, nut-hoarding problem. Squirrels had taken over their places of worship, scampering through sanctuaries, raiding pantries, and interrupting sermons with their relentless chattering. Something had to be done. The Presbyterian Church held a solemn meeting to seek divine guidance. After much prayer and deep theological discussion, they came to a unanimous conclusion. The squirrels were predestined to be there. Who were they to interfere with God's divine will? And so, the squirrels stayed. happily nesting in the rafters, nibbling on hymnals and making themselves quite at home. Over at the Baptist church, the squirrels had taken an unusual interest in the baptistry, splashing around in the holy water like it was a personal swimming pool. The deacons put their heads together and devised a plan. They installed a water slide, hoping the squirrels would simply drown themselves. Unfortunately, the plan backfired. The squirrels loved the slide. Even worse, they instinctively knew how to swim. Word spread through the squirrel community, and by the following Sunday, twice as many had shown up eager for another ride. The Lutherans, torn by their strong sense of duty toward all of God's creatures, refused to harm the squirrels. Instead, they humanely trapped them and released them near the Baptist church. 2 weeks later, the squirrels returned. Turns out, the Baptists had taken down the water slide. The Episcopalians took a different approach. They set out pans of whiskey around the church, hoping the squirrels would drink themselves to death. It seemed like a brilliant idea, until they discovered just how much damage a group of drunk squirrels could do. The choir loft was destroyed, the organist quit, and the pastor was last seen chasing a stumbling squirrel out of the vestry with a broom. The Catholic Church, however, found the most effective solution. They baptized all the squirrels, made them full-fledged members of the church, and now they only show up on Christmas and Easter. As for the Jewish synagogue, they caught the first squirrel, circumcised him. They haven't seen a squirrel since. Deep in the heart of Las Vegas, in a secret casino no human had ever set foot in, a rowdy group of animals gathered around a poker table. The air was thick with the scent of buffalo wings, banana peels, and pure, untamed chaos. The lion growled, glaring across the table. "Stop taking glances at my cards! You're a cheetah!" The cheetah smirked, unfazed. "No, you're a lion!" The warthog snorted, shaking his head. "You two are so busy arguing, you don't even notice the real cheater at the table. The guy with the super long nose who can suck up cards while nobody notices." The elephant huffed indignantly. "Well, I wouldn't have to be so hungry for cards if someone wasn't hogging all the wings." His massive trunk pointed accusingly at the warthog. The warthog rolled his eyes. "Tell that to the dude who thinks eating them will make him fly." All eyes turned to the ostrich, who was nibbling on a half-eaten drumstick. The bird scoffed. "Oh, please, you can't talk. You literally snort off the table every time you win a hand." Before the warthog could retort, the monkey threw his hands up in frustration. "Will we just ignore the fact that someone ate all the bananas?" The table fell silent. Every animal turned to the monkey. The monkey sighed and shrugged. "Give me a break. I can't even get dinner protein now that they fixed all the bugs in the slot machines." The giraffe, who had been casually stretching his neck toward a nearby buffet tray, chuckled. "Why don't you just do what I do? Steal leftovers from random plates. Just lean over and boom, free dinner." Amidst the bickering, the dog at the table sighed and rubbed his temples with his paws. He had been quietly observing the madness unfold, but now he had reached his limit. "Ugh," he muttered, shaking his head. "I knew I should have played with my usual crowd." After a long night of drinking, the tortoise stumbled out of the bar, his shell feeling heavier than usual. He knew he shouldn't have had that last pint, but against his better judgment, and despite his tortoise-like pace, he decided to walk home. Unfortunately for him, his path took him straight through the roughest part of town, the kind of place where even the streetlights flickered nervously. Halfway home, disaster struck. Out of nowhere, 4 snails jumped him. Well, jumped might be an exaggeration. More like surrounded him with surprising efficiency. Before he could react, tiny but surprisingly powerful snail fists pummeled him senseless. They stole the few coins he had left, scrawled rude graffiti on his shell, and vanished into the night. Well, vanished very slowly into the night. Hours later, a kind-hearted squirrel found the battered tortoise and escorted him to the local police station. There, the fox inspector listened carefully as the poor tortoise recounted his traumatic ordeal. "All right, son," said the fox, adjusting his glasses. "Can you describe your attackers? Anything distinctive about them?" The tortoise buried his face in his hands and groaned. "I don't know," he cried. "It all happened so fast." The courtroom was tense as the restaurant owner stood before the judge, accused of secretly adding horse meat to his famous chicken stew. The scandal had rocked the community, and customers were outraged. The judge peered over his glasses. "Sir, can you explain why you did this, and more importantly, how much horse meat did you actually use?" The restaurant owner straightened his jacket and cleared his throat. "For the money, of course. But I swear, Your Honor, I always kept the ratio exactly 50 to 50. Murmurs spread through the courtroom. His honesty was shocking. The judge, rubbing his chin, thought for a moment. "Well, while your actions were deceptive, your honesty here is rare. I won't revoke your license. But from now on, you must clearly advertise that horse meat is an ingredient." With a sigh of relief, the restaurant owner nodded, paid his fine, and walked out of the courthouse with his wife and a close friend. Outside, his friend elbowed him. "All right, tell me the truth. You really put horse meat in that stew, right? Or was there something else?" "Nope," the owner said. "Only horse meat and chicken." His friend narrowed his eyes. "Come on, man. Be honest with me. It was mostly horse meat, wasn't it?" The owner smirked. "Nope. It was always 50-50. One horse per one chicken." Years ago, a man boarded a flight, found his seat, and settled in. But to his surprise, the seat next to him wasn't empty. It was occupied by a parrot, strapped in just like a regular passenger. As the plane took off and reached cruising altitude, the stewardess came by to take drink orders. The man smiled politely. "Could I have a coffee, please?" Before the stewardess could respond, the parrot squawked loudly. "And get me a bloody whiskey, you moron!" The stewardess blinked, startled by the rudeness, but kept her composure. A few minutes later, she returned with a whiskey for the parrot, but forgot the man's coffee. "Excuse me," the man said, raising a hand. "I believe I also asked for a coffee?" The parrot wasted no time. Downing its whiskey in one gulp and screeching, "And get me another darn whiskey while you're at it, idiot!" Visibly rattled, the stewardess scurried off and soon returned with another whiskey for the parrot. But still no coffee for the man. At this point, the man had had enough. If being rude worked for the parrot, maybe it would work for him, too. "I've asked you twice for coffee, moron," he snapped. "Now get it before I slap some sense into you." The words had barely left his mouth when two burly security personnel, who seemingly appeared out of nowhere, grabbed both him and the parrot. Without a word, they marched them down the aisle, yanked open the emergency exit, and threw them out of the plane. Plummeting through the sky, the man flailed in terror. The parrot, however, calmly spread its wings, enjoying the free fall. Glancing over, the bird tilted its head and smirked. "You know," the parrot said, "for someone who can't fly, you've got a big mouth." Ralph stumbled into bed late one night, reeking of whiskey and bad decisions. His wife, already fast asleep, didn't stir as he slid under the covers and promptly passed out. But when he woke up, something was off. Instead of his bedroom ceiling, he found himself standing before massive golden gates. A robed figure with a glowing aura looked down at him. "Welcome, Ralph," said St. Peter solemnly. "You died in your sleep." Ralph's heart pounded. "No way! I can't be dead! I've got too much to live for. Football season's not even over. Please send me back." St. Peter sighed. "There's only one way you can return, but you can't go back as a human. You must return as a lesser being, an animal." Ralph groaned, but desperate to get back home, he pleaded to be sent somewhere familiar. "All right," said St. Peter. "You shall go to a farm near your home." The next thing Ralph knew, he was standing in a dusty barnyard. But something felt strange. He glanced down. Instead of hands, he had feathers. His feet were scaly. And when he opened his mouth, he clucked. Just then, a proud-looking rooster strutted up to him. "So, you're the new hen, huh? How's your first day?" Ralph, still dazed, muttered, "Not bad, I guess, but I have this weird pressure inside me, like I'm about to explode." The rooster chuckled. "Oh, that's just ovulation. You've never laid an egg before?" Ralph's beady eyes widened. "Never!" "Relax and let it happen," the rooster advised. "It's no big deal." Ralph took a deep breath, braced himself, and pop! An egg plopped onto the ground. A wave of overwhelming pride and joy surged through him. "I laid an egg," he clucked excitedly. Moments later, he did it again. Ralph had never felt such happiness. He was embracing his new life, celebrating his newfound motherhood when, smack! A sharp slap hit the back of his head. "Ralph! Wake up!" His wife's furious voice rang out. Ralph's eyes shot open. He was back in his bed. His wife stood over him, arms crossed, glaring. "You crapped the bed, you idiot!" In a quiet little town, the back room of the general store doubled as the local courthouse. It was here that a big city lawyer found himself, representing the railroad in a lawsuit brought by an old rancher. The rancher's prize bull had gone missing right around the time the railroad's train had passed through his property. He wasn't looking for trouble, just fair compensation for his lost livestock. The young lawyer, fresh out of law school and full of confidence, saw an opportunity. Before the case even made it to the judge, he pulled the old rancher aside. "Look," he said smoothly, "we both know court cases can drag on, and I'd hate to see you waste time and money. How about we settle this now? I can't give you what you're asking, but I'll write you a check for half of it. That's a fair deal." The rancher rubbed his chin, thinking it over. After a long pause, he nodded. "All right, son. You got yourself a deal." With a grin, the lawyer drew up the papers, had the rancher sign, and handed him the check. But he just couldn't resist a little gloating. "You know," the lawyer said, pocketing his pen, "I really pulled one over on you in there. The truth is, I never could have won that case. The train crew was asleep when they went through your land. I didn't have a single witness to put on the stand. I was bluffing." The old rancher chuckled, folded the check into his pocket, and looked the lawyer square in the eye. "Well, I'll tell you what, young feller," he said with a wry grin. "I was a little worried about winning that case myself, 'cause that bull came home this morning." Deep in the heart of a lush green swamp, there lived a frog unlike any other. While his fellow frogs were content catching flies and croaking under the moonlight, this frog had a peculiar dream. He longed for the love of a human woman. He had heard the old fairy tales, the ones where a princess kisses a frog and transforms him into a dashing prince. He was convinced that if he could just meet the right girl, his life would change forever. But there was one small problem. No human girl would go anywhere near him. His fellow frogs thought he was strange. "Forget about humans," they told him. "Find yourself a nice lady frog and be happy." But he wouldn't listen. He had his heart set on love. One day he heard whispers of a wise old psychic toad who lived in a secluded bog. They said this toad had the power to see the future. Desperate for answers, the frog set off on a journey, hopping over fallen logs, dodging curious herons, until at last he arrived at the toad's murky pond. "Please," the frog begged, "tell me my fortune. Will I ever find love? Will a beautiful woman ever hold me in her hands?" The psychic toad gazed into the rippling water, eyes half closed in concentration. After a long moment, he croaked, "Yes, I see it now. You will meet a beautiful young woman. She will be fascinated by you, eager to know everything about you." The frog's heart leapt with joy. "This is amazing. Will I meet her at a royal ball, a garden party, maybe by a fountain?" The toad let out a deep sigh before answering. "No," he said, "you'll meet her in her biology class." In the heart of the forest, two caterpillars were in big trouble. A hungry spider, its 8 eyes gleaming with anticipation, skittered toward them, its fangs clicking eagerly. "Run!" shouted the first caterpillar, scrambling up a nearby branch. The second caterpillar was right behind him, their tiny legs moving as fast as they could. They reached the very edge of the branch, only to realize their escape route had come to an abrupt end. Below them was nothing but empty air. Behind them, the spider was closing in fast. "We're trapped!" the second caterpillar panicked. "Not for long!" the first caterpillar grinned. "Hold on tight!" Without hesitation, he chomped down on the branch, biting clean through. With a loud snap, the branch broke free and they plummeted downward. But instead of falling chaotically, the first caterpillar grabbed onto 2 smaller twigs protruding from the branch. With perfect precision, he tilted and turned, steering their makeshift vehicle through the air like a seasoned pilot. The second caterpillar gawked in shock. "This is incredible! How in the world are you doing that?" The first caterpillar scoffed and gave him a sideways glance. "Am I seriously the only one in this whole darn forest who knows how to drive a stick?" Miss Jones wanted to teach her class about vegetables. She picked up a piece of chalk, drew a large cucumber on the blackboard, and asked, "Class, can anyone tell me what this is?" Before anyone else could answer, little Johnny blurted out, "It's a miss." Miss Jones gasped, her face turning bright red. "That's it, Johnny. I've had enough of your filthy mouth. I'm getting the principal." She stormed out and returned moments later with the principal, who walked in, glanced at the blackboard, and froze. After a long pause, he cleared his throat and asked, "All right, which one of you is little Johnny? And more importantly, who the hell drew that so accurately?" A little girl skipped into a pet shop, her bright eyes scanning the cages filled with fluffy animals. She walked up to the counter and, in the sweetest little lisp, asked, "Excuse me, mister, do you keep whittle wobbits?" The shopkeeper's heart melted instantly. He knelt down so he was at eye level with her and smiled warmly. "Why, of course, sweetheart. Do you want a whittle white wobby? Or maybe a soft and fewy black wobby? Oh, what about that cute whittle brown wobby over there?" The little girl placed her tiny hands on her knees, leaned in slightly, and in the quietest, most matter-of-fact voice replied, "I don't think my python really give us a thit." It was a quiet evening at the bar when an unusual trio stumbled in. A cowboy, a spider, and a dinosaur. Without a word, they each took a seat at the bar and began drinking heavily, their faces filled with sorrow. The bartender, curious and a little concerned, finally asked, "What's got you all so down?" The cowboy took a deep breath, downed a shot, and sighed. "My horse got loose, ran into traffic, and got hit by a semi-truck. It was carrying tanks of gasoline. The whole thing exploded. Poor thing was blown to bits." The spider nodded solemnly. "I lost my husband in that same fire. The driver saw him crawling on the dashboard, freaked out, and crashed, trying to squash him. The bartender, now in utter shock, slowly turned to the dinosaur. The dinosaur sniffled, took a sip from his straw, and whispered, "My whole family was on that truck."